So these guys found out I was in real estate, and I'm excited. I'm like, okay, I'll help you guys out. Well, once I saw those tax returns, I was like, bro, you only made 20,000 last year. It's like, no, that's just my personal one, which is my business taxes. I'm like, you only netted 20,000. I thought you were this big baller. And it's like, no, it's this and that. I'm like, bro, I can't approve you for anything. Can you get a guarantor? And they were like, hey, I'll get one of the big managers. When I got the big manager's taxes, some of them didn't even want to give up their taxes because I guess they were so embarrassed. And some of them was organizational consultants, the higher up. And when I saw them, like 50,000, I'm like, no wonder you guys live with all 5, 6 people in one house.
Do you want to go ahead and tell me anything about like what you did during your time in the business, how long you were there, anything like that?
Sure. I was in the business. The business is Credico for almost 2 years, and I was doing Verizon door to door, internet, phone, and cable all through the New York area.
When you reached out to us, you wanted to focus mainly on some of the behind the scenes stuff that hasn't been covered, and we'll get to that. But is there just kind of take me through? You said you were there for 2 years. You've obviously been out of it for a while. What are some of the things you remember about your day-to-day responsibilities, the office, your owners, anything like that that sticks out to you?
Um, I kind of did a lot, especially if my owner was out of the office because we didn't have an assistant manager. And I was kind of more of the veteran one compared to all the other guys. And what I did was basically what the managers had to do: the interviews, the first round interviews, call them back for a second round if I liked them or not. So I had to go and find out basically who we can bring back and who can we just let go of. And then after that, we did morning meetings with all the leaders, especially if you hit the bell, you participate in morning meetings. And then after, it would be finding out who was a high roller, doing the impact, and then atmosphere. A lot of people call it different. We just called it atmosphere,
Yeah.
where we did PC, which is um, practicing your pitch and the impacts and the skits and the games and all that good stuff.
Were there any particular factors that they wanted, since you said you had to do first rounds and you kind of had to scout people for second rounds? Were there any particular things you looked for to bring people back for second rounds?
Yeah, we had kind of like a process elimination. So we had a scale from like 1 to 10. 10 being very sharp, usually somebody who went to an Ivy League school, somebody who had sales experience, somebody who came from the real estate industry, anybody who basically did sales before. That's what you say a sharp 10. So anybody who is super sharp, they will go out with the sharpest leader we had in the office, somebody who can bring them in. And then the scale goes from 10 to 9, 9 almost there, not quite there yet, but keep an eye out. 7, and then right around the 6, it's like I kind of felt like there were filters just to add a little bit more people in the office. Anything below a 6, like 5s or 4s or anything, the red flags, we just never called back.
And it's interesting you talked about how sales experience would make someone a 10, because I've talked to several people who've also said that they were who were doing the interviews, and they said that sales experience might have been a red flag, because if someone has had sales experience and worked for actual companies, that they would more easily see through this and kind of suspect that it's kind of a scam type thing.
Well, we actually kind of hid that very well because we were with Verizon and we had reps from Verizon come into our office. So it seemed more legit than what it was. So we weren't really as worried as much as people from Charity or Energy, because it was, Charity, UNICEF, they're big corporations and stuff, but nobody from UNICEF ever came to talk to our office about anything. We did have 1 or 2 Verizon people that would come and talk to us about not even just how to sell the product, but just different bundles they came in. So it was like, oh, we have a new HBO special for the month. We had Game of Thrones season something is coming out next week. So they would just tell us things about Verizon. That's it. But they wouldn't tell us how to sell it, how to sell the bundles, how to sell the products, nothing like that.
You mentioned charity. Was your office doing the charity also?
Yeah, we were located in Times Square and right on West 44th and 8th. So our office was actually like 7 other offices on top of each other. So you would have the business to business in the morning, and then you have the door to door people right after. So everybody did something different. So you had charity, you had energy people, you also had restaurant coupon people. You had a lot of different types of offices, only bundled in one. So I I worked under the Credico umbrella. So the two big offices in Credico were the ones in Midtown, which is the West 44th and 8th, and the other one's in Wall Street, which is ran by the Scottish. We call them the Scottish crew. And actually, the guy, the young lady you were interviewing from San Antonio, his manager came from that crew. Call him Horgan.
Yeah, Horgan.
Yeah, he came over with two Scottish guys from Europe, and they opened up in Wall Street, and I knew those guys very well as well.
Now you mentioned a couple other names in your message to us. People that who worked for Cydcor and Credico. They know them well. They're on the Devil Corp website. They've been in the business for a long time. Did you work hand in hand with any of those with either of those people?
Yeah, I actually even had dinner at their homes. Had dinner at their homes. I used to party with almost all of them, almost every other weekend. I used to hang out with so many managers and stuff. The reason I know they came from Cydcor is because they kept talking about it. So I really didn't have, when I first started, I didn't know what Critical was. I just thought everybody had like some sort of affiliation with each other, but I really didn't know what Critical was. I didn't know they were the client broker. And I'm like, okay, so what's Critical? He's like, oh, they're the ones who gets us the clients, like Verizon and Charity and all that stuff. And then the more I hung out with them, the more they let a little bit more details out. It's like, well, we all came from Cydcor. And I'm like, what is Cydcor? It's like, oh, that's another client broker. And I told him, then why'd you leave Cydcor? He's like, oh, because they didn't want to pay us for after, there's a structure when you become a manager and you do outside deals. And if those guys do another outside deal, it's called first generation, second generation, so side, right?
Yep.
Apparently, Cydcor didn't want to pay anybody after like a second gen, third gen. After that, none of the promoting managers, so they decided to branch out and start their own crew, their own client broker. And one of the guys that helped start Credico was one of the guys from Smart Circle. His name is I don't remember, Derek something, but they just call him DC. So I realized more and more working over the years that the only way you can actually make money in that is if you were one of the founding members.
Yeah. And that's typical of most, even though this isn't technically by legal jargon a pyramid scheme. That's a hallmark of most pyramid schemes. So that you got these very high level people to divulge information to you that I honestly don't think they would divulge to many people. Why do you think they trusted you so much? I mean, that kind of sounds to me like you were kind of high up in their trust circle.
Well, because I knew a lot of their secrets. I knew their tactics and stuff, and I knew, yeah, being born and raised in New York City and not from the, let's say, the best neighborhoods in the world, you can get a lot of favors done, especially for a lot of these guys who have addiction. So if they ask you for a favor, it's like, do you know a guy? Of course I know a guy. Let me see if I can hook you up. So you build that trust. And then after that, they invite you to like their house parties and stuff like that. And then, your own manager's building you up as well, saying, hey, he's going to be my next assistant manager. Treat this guy good and all that stuff. And they build you up more on that. And then they find out you're doing interviews and they're kind of telling you little tricks and trade like, hey, if you're going to get tens, interview this way. If you're going to get nines, do this way. Eights like this. If she's hot, let me meet her first. Things like that. They would actually tell me a lot of things like that. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And, so they're giving me a little tricks of the trade, basically.
Okay. So really what the main reason that you reached out to us was to talk about some of the, like you said, behind the scenes things
Yeah.
that a lot of people don't get to experience, and especially with as close as you were to these higher ups of Cydcor, Credico, you seem to know a lot. And to quote your message, um, you hung out with all the upper management guys to the point where they were doing crazy parties at their condo in New Jersey. And you continued on. No one ever touches on what happens behind closed doors, like the drugs, the sexual predators, the advances, how the managers interview new starts, try to sleep with them right away, and then get rid of them right away. So there's a whole lot of stuff right there, just in that small amount. So can you take us through, like, apparently some of the things like you witnessed, some of the things you learned that the normal person who gets in and might leave after a couple months might not even know is going on behind closed doors?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I kind of noticed it with a couple of managers from the other cities that came over on business trips and stuff like that. And the way they explained to me, I mean, the first thing they always look at is, as they would say, the talent we had. And when they said the talent, I knew they were talking about the girls we had in the office. And I'm talking about the male managers, not the female managers, obviously. But the male managers, oh, wow, you have very talented people. Let me go on. Let me take her out on the field. I already know what they're saying. Like, let me take her out on the field. I'm like, no, 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 no. This one's short. Leave her alone. It's like, no, no, no. I'm a manager. She needs to see how a manager performs in my office, or how I do things and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, I know she's not coming back. That's what I was thinking in my head. So they, you actually see that a lot, and I think it's from the form is when they hit that, that top of the pyramid. Well, they think they're in top of the pyramid as a manager. They can do whatever the fuck they want, and they're built in their heads that they're making six figures. All the women want to sleep with them. All this stuff, right? They're business owners. All this stuff. So this is actually what they feed the new starts. Especially if a manager's taking an interview out, which in a big office really doesn't happen as much. But when it comes to a small office, managers are still on the field. They're still interviewing, and when managers take them out, that's all they feed them is just bullshit. Yeah, it's my office. I make six figures, this and that. Trying to basically impress the lady, not just to be on their team, but, you know, later on hit on them and, make them eat the bullshit they're feeding them. And I actually seen that a lot. I've seen a lot of managers go to other offices and basically, like a predator, try to pick out who's the beautiful one in the office and take them out on the field and talk to them all night. And, after that, they quit. And I always ask them, why'd you quit? It's like, oh, because he was being inappropriate after, or this and that, or something happened. And I didn't find out the manager was married. I didn't know he was married, things like that. So I kind of saw how some of the managers, it was just to them, they saw it as a feeding frenzy. They did a lot of things where it wasn't business. It was like they're for their own personal gain.
I think a lot of what you're describing, I mean, even though it's 2020, I think it's still present in a lot of businesses today. Because if you're one of these ladies that this happens to, and you speak up, you'll probably end up losing this great opportunity that they have you believing in. Because that's something that is supposed to be kept quiet, and like you said, these managers, these owners feel like they can do pretty much whatever they want. They're acting like the Wolf of Wall Street. They feel like they can have all these women, they make all this money, even though they may not be. And then you also talked a little bit about, you mentioned earlier, people with addictions, and I've heard from several people that say amongst certain owners there are a lot of drugs flowing through this space, correct?
Oh yeah, we had a couple of guys in Jersey and whatnot, and they were all cokeheads. Shit ton of them, crap ton of cokeheads. Because I mean, if you're working those type of hours, you're gonna find a form of substance to keep you awake. You know what I mean? So even if you're making pennies, but you still want to prove that you're this big badass manager or this big badass owner, you're gonna want a form of substance. But most of them, yeah, they were addicted to cocaine. We even had a kid die of he overdosed from heroin in the Times Square office,
Wow.
and the kid was only like 22, 23. It was insane, the things these guys would do.
And was there ever any connection made back to in the office or anything like that from that? Do you know?
Um, they try. I mean, when it comes to a situation like that, you're grieving for the family because they just lost, a young guy and
Yeah.
everything. But a lot of people are not really asking questions like, how did this kid do this and that? Was he just experimenting? Things like that. I honestly did not know who provided him the drugs, but knowing that heroin is not an easy drug to grab, even just opioids, it's not an easy drug to just go get. You have to know somebody. Especially if you're doing opioids, you need somebody who has medical connections to get something like that. Heroin, same thing. You gotta know somebody in the up and ups to get some sort of drug like that. So I didn't really ask a lot of questions. I just knew that when I found out he overdosed from heroin, I'm like, what? That's where we're at now?
Yeah.
I can understand marijuana, cool, medicinal purposes. Cocaine, all right, you might take it a little bit far, but heroin? Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think anybody who's ever spent any amount of time in one of these offices.
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't speak for heroin, but I mean, you almost get the feeling that some of these guys are doing coke for sure. If you look at some of these opportunity meetings and some of the conference calls these guys do, they're talking 800 miles an hour. They're full of all this energy every morning before they go out in the field for 10 hours and they might get 3 hours of sleep. Yeah, you're going to have to do something to keep that energy up.
Exactly.
And if you've brainwashed yourself that it's normal to do this for 6 7 days a week even, and that's normal, then yeah, of course you're gonna need something to do that.
That's true. And I was kind of naive in that situation. I'm thinking, okay, this is just like Wall Street or the stock market or any of these guys doing finances or real estate, because these guys, they party just like that. The difference is that they're actually making 6 figures, 7 figures. We're barely making anything to get dollar pizza.
Yeah. So you were in there, you said, for a couple of years. What did you make assistant manager, or to what position did you make?
Um, I was almost senior corporate trainer, but I never made it to assistant manager. No. After a certain time, I just stopped buying into the bullshit. Honestly, I got into another business and I got into real estate and I got my license and everything like that. And I just stopped buying into the bullshit. And believe me, I had really good friends there. My girlfriend was in the business. My girlfriend before that was in the business, and I knew once I left, um, my girlfriend at that time, she was going to go away with the business. So I, you know how they say, oh, I'm looking for the word, preemptive strike. So you preemptively think about everything it's gonna happen right after the business. All that happened. Nobody talked to me anymore. Only the close couple of people, which are not even in the business anymore, they quit as well. Those are the ones that came back and talked to me like right after. But they all like kind of like blacklisted me from ever talking to them and speaking to them. I think it's because I knew a lot of their personal information, like if they were married, who they were cheating on with, and stuff like that. Especially if their wife was in the business as well. So they kind of like pushed me on the side and were like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. It's like a disconnection in Scientology. You leave the organization and you have to cut everybody off.
So you've seen the documentaries, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. The same structure, same tactics. I remember I was doing because they were grooming me to be a manager at one
Mhm.
point. But all these tactics and everything, it's basically like Scientology. It's kind of like a cult. They want to attack you emotionally and mentally before anything else.
So what made you finally decide that you'd had enough? Because I feel like being in that environment, you might not have sought it out, but I mean, partying with these upper level people, being built up to be a big shot at some point. I know for some that's kind of good on the ego and makes them feel good. So what kind of made you finally decide? I'm done.
Well, the money wasn't there. I mean, that's why you're in business. It's not for a fucking dream. It's to actually make money. And if you can't even pay your goddamn bills, your basic day-to-day bills, then it's just bullshit. I mean, people can tell you they make money, but Where's the fuck is the proof? I mean, that's the one thing about real estate. I know if I don't make a deal, I might go hungry for 3 months. But it's a known fact you can actually make six figures in real estate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And a lot of people, I have so many managers tell me, oh, I make six figures and six figures. And once I started pushing more and more real estate, I'm like, okay, well, show me your pay stub. Show me your tax return. Because that's what we ask when you want to rent an apartment in New York City or any state, or you want to get a mortgage. You got to show me your taxes. Show me your pay stub. Show me your AIG, which is your adjusted gross income. Show me how much you're a company net. And that's when you can tell people are bullshitting you.
Did you ever run into that with people you knew were owners?
Oh, funny story, actually. So after I became a real estate agent, half of these guys wanted apartments. So I don't know how it is. I honestly don't know where you're located, but in New York City, there's a very strict renting rule. So you have to make 40 times the rent. So if you're, say, the apartment, let's say, is in the Upper West Side and it's over $2,000, right? Your gross income has to be 40 times that rent. So you take 2,000 times 40, around 60, 80,000, let's say, give or take, right? Your credit score has to be around 680 and above. You have to show your tax returns from last year to prove that you make that amount. And if you don't make none of that, you can get a guarantor, which has to make over 80 times the rent. And same credit score, they want to see your portfolio, they want to see all this stuff, right? And that's even just for an application for an apartment in New York City. So these guys found out I was in real estate, and, you know, I'm excited. I'm like, okay, I'll help you guys out. Well, once I saw those tax returns, I'm like, bro, you only made 20,000 last year. It's like, no, it's, you know, that's just my personal one, which is my business taxes. I'm like, you only netted 20,000. I thought you were this big baller. And it's like, no, it's this and that. I'm like, bro, I can't approve you for anything. Can you get a guarantor? And they were like, hey, I'll get one of the big managers. When I got the big manager's taxes, some of them didn't even want to give up their taxes. I guess they were so embarrassed. And some of them was organizational consultants, the higher up. And when I saw them, I'm like, 50,000. I'm like, no wonder you guys live with all 5, 6 people in one house. I'm like, you guys would never get approved for anything in New York City. No wonder you guys live in New Jersey, which obviously there's a big difference in renting an apartment in New York City and in New Jersey. Different regulations and everything. I know it's right across the river, but even them, you know, they don't ask as much questions as you do in New York City. And if you're making six figures in New York City, you're living in New York City. You're not living in Jersey in a 5 people house and nothing like that. You're golden if you're making six figures in New York City. And when I found all that out, it was like, wow, these guys are just bullshit. I know they were bullshitting, but this is another level of bullshit.
Yeah.
They're like in the poverty level.
Yeah, and you literally had the paperwork. You could see the paperwork, you could see the numbers, and they still tried to deny it. They still said, no, I made much more than this. It's just not reflected in this.
Even my broker, who's the owner of my brokerage firm over there, and he's still my partner, actually. We still do deals, and I'm over here. As some referrals, he cuts me a check if I have any referrals in real estate or anything. He came over to help me out in one situation when I was trying to get one of my friends approved. He's like, why are you wasting your time with this shit? Like, this guy shouldn't be he doesn't own this fucking business. Look at it. He's like, he has no power of attorney over any of his assets. And I asked him, because I didn't really know business like that, or so detailed into business. Like, what do you mean? He's like, he's incorporated, but he's not the sole proprietor of that incorporation. This other company, Credico LCC, which is limited liability company, they're the ones that own everything. They incorporated him because he's just a manager, but they're actually protecting their own personal assets. I'm like, wow. Okay, so what? And I'm still like, this all sounds like Chinese talk to me. It's like, well, what I'm trying to say is they run the company for these guys, but if they fuck up, they can protect their personal assets, meaning their tablets or anything like that. That's all insured under the company. But these guys, they don't get shit. I'm like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. So they're basically just running McDonald's for the bigger corporation of McDonald's. Like, yep, that's about it, because that's what it is on paper. And then in the same paperwork, they make you sign the power of attorney towards them, which is the dumbest thing in the world. They have access to your own fucking money.
Yep, they have access to everything, I've learned. Yep.
But why would anybody? And I guess that's one of the things that I was right there when I was quitting, because my manager was still talking to me. It's like, oh, you can be manager and everything. And then I heard an assistant manager, he was about to leave to like Tennessee or something, and he was talking about the paperwork, and he kind of showed it to me. I'm like, hey, don't sign that paper. And they're like, why? It's like, you're giving away power of attorney. You know what that means? No, not really. You're giving them the rights to everything. He's like, no, they're gonna look after me. We have a national marketeer or some banker or some bullshit. I'm like, no, that means you're giving them your money. They can take as much money as they want out of your bank accounts. Don't sign anything. Don't sign shit, because if the shit hits the fan, you're fucked.
Yeah.
You're still liable for everything. And yeah, he didn't pay attention to me. He went to somewhere for 2 months and then he quit. And yeah, those are kind of the tipping points. You get more and more into like, yeah, I'm gonna quit this shit. Fuck this.
Yep, and it doesn't matter if it's Credico, Cydcor, Smart Circle, Abco, Cobra, whatever entity that we're talking about here, they're all run exactly the same way. So this, and that's why the brainwashing has to be there. That's why they have to take you through. Your entire day is scripted. You have that morning atmosphere to build you up before you go through 8, 10, 12 hours of BS and make $20 a day. But no, you're still going to own your own business. No, nobody owns their own business. Smart Circle.
Not on paper.
No, and Smart Circle can claim, everybody's an ICL. That doesn't mean anything. That just means, like you said, you're a McDonald's franchisee. You can run your McDonald's, but at the end of the day, McDonald's, in this case, it's not McDonald's, it's Smart Circle, Cydcor, or Credico. They're going to take what's theirs. So you can sign your name on whatever paperwork that says you're the president or the owner or whatever, but you're never going to be that. And it's so sad that these businesses, or these cults, because they're not businesses, these cults have to rely on such smoke and mirrors and brainwashing to get these gullible people and desperate people to give them an opportunity and just lie to them about it. And like you said, and I've heard from so many people, you leave, you're left with nothing. You don't get unemployment, you don't get severance, you have no income, and you have nothing.
You can't even put it in your. The funny thing is, I got W-2s. I didn't even get 1099s every time I did my taxes. It was like a W-2. So I'm like, wait, I'm an employer, not an independent contractor. It was like a mind fuck, honestly. And then that's the one thing you learn also getting into financing and Wall Street and anything to do with numbers and banks. You find out the difference between taxes, tax exempts, 1040s, 1099s, all this stuff. And then you realize, shit, I was fucking ignorant as fuck when I did this. I left a really good business to get into this just to learn a little bit more about business. And it was actually a blessing because I learned. It led me to real estate and it opened my eyes even more. It's like, wow, now I know how to filter more people's bullshit. I learned, especially in that business, you always want to assume the sale and all this stuff. Now I just assume people's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's going to be bullshit, especially in that business.
Mm-hmm.
So even, like you mentioned, Wolf of Wall Street, right? Jonah Hill's character, right before Leonardo DiCaprio said all his money, what did he say? Show me a pay stub right now for $80,000 and I'll quit my fucking job today. That's exactly how banks are. Oh, you want to buy this house? Show me your pay stubs. Show me your tax returns before I even decide to give you a mortgage.
Yeah.
Things like that. And a lot of these people, you go out on Tuesday, Thursday night drinks, the team nights, crew nights, all that shit. And you can sometimes tell just by the way they present themselves. The same suit they've been wearing for the whole entire week. Maybe they have one or two pairs. The debit card all fucking beat up. I'm like, what? You make 6 figures. How come you're not carrying an Amex card? Simple. Why are you using a debit card? People that make a lot of money, they don't use their own money. They use imaginary money to pay that off.
Yep.
That's the one thing I learned in real estate. The credit score is very, very important to people that are making 6 figures. Because you open up other possibilities and a lot of loans from banks and stuff like that. But if this guy's making 6 figures and he has a shitty debit card and I have a higher credit card than him, he's not making more money than me. So there's a lot of tips that a lot of people can see, and it's just in front of your eyes. And I was ignorant. I didn't really know at that time, but now I know. When I see it, I'm like, I still actually go to. I used to go to the same bars in Manhattan where they go almost every Tuesday and Thursday because it's cheap beer. And I still run into them. I used to run into them, and same thing. We were the same fucking suits they did 3 years ago. And I'm like, wow, okay. And I actually, some of the guys came to work for me in real estate because they saw me progressing and everything. And that's the one thing. Once you leave, they want you to fail in life.
Oh, sure.
Which is the oddest fucking thing in the world
Yep.
because I know when I was making my team in real estate, I would tell them, real estate is not for everyone. I know that. You get your license and you're hoping for the best, but if it's not for you, it's not for you. It's not a big deal. There's a lot of things in the world you can do. Not this business. You quit, you're a fucking quitter, you're this and that. No. Intelligent people quit because they know it's not leading anywhere. So they're going to put their 100% focus on something else. And that's what I did. And I actually became more successful at it.
Sure.
Than being in the business. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can share that too because, and the reason they do that is they want you to stay. They will downgrade, they will talk down to any real opportunity because they're trying to sell through the brainwashing that this is the only opportunity that you need and that they'll say it's not for everyone. It's not for the failures. It's not for the people who want to work 40 hours a week or whatever. And everything they promise, but they give you the promises up front to make it sound good so you don't question the promises. So that when you're a year, 2 years, 3 years in and you're still not making $30,000, you still can't take off whenever you can, you're still living with 5 people, that you don't question it. They just want you to work harder, even though literally most every person who has left the cult and has done something else, whether it's real estate, whether it's education, whether it's anything, working at a restaurant, they're making more money than these poor people and these pathetic false owners, these cult leaders that keep bringing people in. But yeah, like you said, you look at the pay stubs. Pay attention to those little things. Look at how they're dressed. What kind of car are they driving? You know, is it a new model? Do they have enough money where they can buy a car? Do they even have their own car, or is it something they've been driving for 25 years? You know, just little things like that. And you mentioned like the tax, all the forms and everything. 99 out of 100 people who get into these companies, they probably have no shred of knowledge about anything like that. They're just looking for it. But that's another thing that, like, I've felt this from the very beginning. The number one defense against scams like Credico and Smart Circle and Cydcor are questions. Is when you start asking questions to the owners about how much they're really making, and, you know, why don't you have your own car? Why don't you have your own place? Why do you have to live with 5 other people? Why can't you take a vacation when you're supposed to be able to have free time and take off whenever? When you start asking questions, they get defensive because they can't answer, because the answers reveal the truth. And the truth is something that these companies don't want people to know, because if they know the truth, then they're not going to be able to recruit these people anymore. They're going to know the scam for what it is, which is a scam.
Well, it's also they don't want to lose face. That's the most important thing. That's why a lot of managers are still in the business for a couple of years, still making bullshit, because they invested so much time, and their families probably telling them, "Yo, this is a fucking scam," and they're fighting with them. Leave. Save yourself, and it's a lot of managers even recruit their own friends, and after they leave, they lose that friendship, and they don't want to lose face, and they still want to save face, saying, "I'm gonna make it one day," but come on.
Yeah.
What is making it if you lost everybody?
Yeah, it's the sunken cost fallacy. So you've already put so much into it. I can't get out now, which is kind of what I struggled with, because I was in it for 15 months and I had to think for myself, do I want to start all over again when I thought I was working towards something that in reality doesn't exist? And then there's this fear, right? Like for someone who's been an owner for 3 years, 4 years, still making $30,000. What if I leave and I have to apply for jobs. I have to go on interviews, and the whole thing just seems frightening, especially now in this economy where, the virus, who knows what's going to happen if the economy is ever going to get back. But, just the thought of, well, I mean, I have steady employment now. I'm an owner. I get to call the shots. I might only be making $30,000 a year, but it's still better than being unemployed and searching for jobs and going on interviews and doing that whole thing again. And I think that's what a lot of owners have done. And I've talked to many people who believe this too, that, these owners that have been in the cult for 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years, and are still making only 5 figures, they've kind of accepted that they're never going to do anything else. They're going to be lifers. I've heard that's a word in this cult. They're going to be a lifer. They're going to always be a part of it. They'll probably never make more than $40,000-$50,000 a year, but that's where they're stuck.
Because honestly, they're addicted to the power. I mean, they can, and the power that's given to them is, a lot of people buy into their bullshit. And, if you take that away from them, or if you even compete with somebody that actually has a real job, they're never going to compete. I mean, if you see a lot of them, they marry their fucking, what they call assistants, because they can't get anybody else but them. Anybody else is like, well, I thought you were making 6 figures. We have a baby. This is only fucking $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to leave you. So it's little things like that. You're not really bringing money to the table. It's kind of, and that's what it is. They just close their whole entire their world is only solely based on this business. So they're not going to, nobody that's not involved, they're not going to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
It can be friends and families. Oh, mom and dad, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I'm doing great. Aunts, uncles, cousins, I'm doing great. But can I borrow $20 real quick? I need to go to team night. Shit like that. So it's now looking at it, when you give up everything and you get nothing in return, it's not even fucking worth it. So yeah, we had a couple of cases where managers would come over, say on a business trip with their top guy and stuff. And yeah, they would walk around atmosphere like sharks, trying to pick out the pretty lady and everything to take her out for a day in observation with them, anything like that. And then right after, they would always miss the next. You know how you always have to be in the office or you won't be able to go on the field and stuff. These girls would always go missing. I wouldn't say they killed them or anything, but they would never show up the next day or the day after that or anything like that. Or they would show up, they would smell like booze and like they've been drinking all night and some partying all night and stuff like that. But they're all adults and shit. But honestly, if in my real estate office, if somebody pulled that shit on me, I would fucking kill them. Mainly because you're fucking with my business.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little bit different in that business because you don't own your own business. But as a corporate trainer, or even somebody who runs your own team and none of your team is there, then you're fucked basically. Because then they're managers going to yell at you and all that stuff. Yeah, so managers, main reason I would say any manager is still in the business is because of all the brainwashing they do to these young women. They have the wife at home or they have the kids. Even sometimes their wife is in the business. They don't care. They go on a business trip with a couple of young girls and then come back. That's really, I imagine, why they're still in business. Because they can convince and brainwash all these young recruits. Most offices only recruit young people. They don't recruit older people or anybody with experience because you can't really manipulate them. Mm-hmm. You would only manipulate the younger, fresh out of college, somebody that's 18, anything like that. But it's all really just a game. Kind of reminds you of the Scientology or even Jim Jones's cult.
Yep.
That's how they make themselves see like gods, and then they would have like 20 wives.
Sure. They're searching for down on their luck people. Maybe desperate people that are searching for something. I have a dead-end career. In this case, I have a dead-end career. I need to find something. And
Of
this
course.
this operation offers you that, because you step into one of these offices, it's something that you've never experienced before. It's going to be something memorable. They're going to make you feel like you belong, like they want you. And that's exactly what Scientology does. It's exactly what Jonestown did. All these people from random walks of life that have nothing in common. They were just given a rough time in life, or they were going down the wrong path, and this is the path, right? If you get into one of these offices, you own your own business, this is the path to make everything better. It's so cult like, and I don't know if it was designed that way when the founders of DS Max and all the predecessor companies started these cults years ago. I don't know if that was the intention, or if maybe one of the founders does have experience in religious or personality cults, and they kind of modeled their operation after that. But
Yeah.
when you look at the evidence, you can't ignore it, right? Like, if someone is in this and it's just like any cult, right? If you go up to someone in Scientology and say, hey, you're in a cult, they're immediately going to think you're crazy, you're insane, and they're going to walk away from you. Same thing here. If I go up to my local Smart Circle office and say, hey, do you know you guys are in a cult? They're going to be like, oh, you're just a failure. Get the hell out of here. They're not going to listen
Of
to
course.
reason or evidence.
Of course,
But
because they think you're dumb enough to join a cult. So they basically try to mask it and say, no, I'm in a business. I'm going to be a business owner. I'm going to do this and that. But how many business owners are standing in a stand, selling a corporation product and not their own product? I mean, they always try to say, what's his name, Paul Mitchell shampoo. The guy went door to door doing sales. Well, yeah, but fucking Paul Mitchell shampoo was his business. It wasn't fucking Verizon. It wasn't charity. It was his fucking shampoo. He made it in his basement. That's the difference. He was the sole proprietor of the fucking shampoo. And it's just little things like that. You open your eyes more and more in time. A lot of people say, well, you did 2 years there. I was like, yeah, because every time I wanted to quit, I had to go and party with the top managers. And these guys, oh, don't quit here, get drunk here, feed you whatever you wanted. Literally whatever you wanted. Oh, go hang out with these people, go hang out with that people, this and that. And, for a young guy in New York City, you're like, shit, this is actually not as bad as it is. But and then when you get a little bit older and wiser, you realize like shit, none of that stuff was even worth it. Not at all. You know how many lives you fucking ruined? How many people you hurt? And now when you have a kid, you're like, fuck, I fucked up. I fucked up bad. Especially and cancellations. I saw that the lovely young lady you were talking to last time, she was talking about she didn't know how her apps were canceled and shit. I know how the fucking apps were canceled. These guys couldn't pay the fucking rent. So they cancel them personally so they can make some money. And you have no proof there saying that they canceled. There's no paper, there's nothing. They just tell you. And you have to take their word for them. Yeah, they canceled. No, they fucking pocketed your money, bro. That's what it was. I've seen it plenty of times. And I actually seen a lot of assistant managers get promoted like that. Managers would feed them applications so they can hit the 10,000 mark every week so they can get promoted to assistant manager. And I feel like that's honestly the only way you can ever made it in that business into management. You had to be good in with the higher ups so they can feed you apps or they can build your team. When I worked for my manager, she was so busy doing all these interviews and stuff, I had to build the team for her. I had to do not just interviews for myself, I had to do interviews for her as well. So I had like a day of observation with 5 people. So, and that's one of the things, you help them build your team, but and then after when it's your turn to build, they forget all about you.
Yep.
And a lot of people see that, and you see a pattern too. Most people that made it into management is because they were dating a manager or assistant manager, or they were dating somebody in the business that was in the higher ups that would definitely help them.
Yeah.